Welcome to the Family Life Blended podcast. I'm Ron Deal. We help blended families and those who love them pursue the relationships that matter most. If you have children or grandchildren, if you've ever wondered how you're going to influence them in a positive direction away from all the things that the world is trying to influence them towards, or if you've ever worried that how are we going to keep these kids off drugs? How are we going to keep them off alcohol, porn, or the multitude of other vices that are out there and keep them off during their adolescent and young adult years? What do you do if they're already on them? Well, keep listening or watching. That's the focus of today's episode of Family Life Blended. Before I introduce my guest, let me remind you that our next summit on Step Family Ministry will be October 10th and 11th. We're going to be in Dallas this year. This ministry equipping event is designed for leaders in the local church, and it's going to help you integrate Step Family Ministry principles into your existing ministry. Whatever it is that you do, marriage ministry, adult ed, student ministry, whatever it is, there's an opportunity for you to minister to step families and their children, and we want to try to equip you for that. This is the premier training and networking event for blended family ministry in the country, so I hope that you will consider joining us. Check the show notes. It'll tell you how to get connected to all of that. Well, my guest in the studio with me today is Dr. Adrian Hickmon. He's a friend, and let me just tell you, for a long time, I have admired his work in founding a place called Capstone Treatment Center. It's in Searcy, Arkansas, about an hour from where I live here in Little Rock. And Capstone is arguably one of the most effective inpatient programs for males 14 to 26 years of age who are struggling with some sort of addiction or a behavior where they're abusing a drug or porn or something. And Adrian is here to help us think through this. How do we protect our kids? How do we help our kids? And I am so glad that you have joined me here in the studio today. Adrian, welcome.
I'm glad to be here, Ron. Good to see you again.
It's good to see you. You, my friend, have been in marriage and family therapy as a clinician for how many years?
31 years.
31 years. You were a coach before that. We'll get to that in a little bit. You played football before that. Capstone has been around for how long?
23 years.
Okay, so you guys have been at the core of helping young men in particular. I know you're moving towards a new treatment facility for young women. Is that correct?
Yes, Encounter.
Okay. I know you've learned a ton. Would you just help us understand? Let's just start with this. Tell us what Capstone does and the kind of work that you do there.
Wow. I thought you said this was a 45-minute discussion. But I think the best way to say it is there's a slice of the pie of the American population that are Christians, that when they need help, they're seeking help that is not going to be against Christianity and have belief systems that undermine it, so they seek for Christian help.
Okay.
But at the same time, they want professional excellence in that. And there's a lot of Christian programs out there with great people that are just good-hearted, but they don't know what they're doing. You know, and so we jumped in to be a program that would fill that void, to give professional excellence in a Christ-centered environment. And, you know, I was told by many people that I had worked with my private practice clients in sending them to treatment, don't make it Christian, you'll go bankrupt. I mean, all those kind of statements. And I remember telling one man who was very wonderful to me, we'll just have to go under then because we're going to make it this way. So what we have provided is there are multiple different, let's say, eruptions of the volcano from drugs and alcohol and self-harm and pornography and intensity-based sex and all these things that are addictive behaviors that are steamrolling America, especially youth. Underneath that, there's a magma pool of trauma, of isolation, disconnection, attachment incapacity, lack of purpose and connection with God. And then under that, there's a family context in which the both of those battlefronts exist. And there are families out there that are a part of the problem, but there are others that are not. And the thing to remember on that is every single family is the most important part of the solution. And so that's what we try to bring together and do work with everybody in the family, because that's how you are able to save and turn the direction of the child that's in jeopardy.
I want us to talk today about to two audiences, because I know we got people watching that fall into both of these camps. The first camp is people who have a child who is actively drinking, drugging, or something. But I also want us to talk to the parents who are going, no, that's not happening with my kids, but I know and love and care for somebody whose kids are doing that. Or I just want to prevent my kids from going down that road. So what do I need to know, and how do we kind of build strength and resilience into our children and into our household? So let's just sort of tackle those one at a time. Let's start with somebody who's listening and they're in a really rough spot with one of their kids. And they have a sense that something's going on, or maybe they have clarity that, yes, their child is drinking, drugging, or doing porn or something. What do they do? How do they think about the problem, if you will? And what would be the first things you would just offer them?
The first thing that I would say in that is almost every time there is going to be a difference between what mom and dad think. And it's like if you could break that into and call it the executive subsystem. If it's a birth mother and a birth father and they're married, or if it's a blended family and there's a stepfather and a stepmother, or any combination like that, they are the executive system. And I have never seen one that there wasn't some degree of disagreement on how big the problem is. So first thing I would say is you got to find the facts to know what you're up against. In the book, The Art of War, Sun Tzu says, know your enemy and know yourself. If you don't know either one of those, you're in trouble. And so finding the facts is first. I had a man call once that wanted his son to come to Capstone, and he was pushing me like a bulldozer to accept him. And I was asking every question I could to find out what were we up against. And there was one thing. The man was a pastor, and he had found 2 empty beer cans in the back of his son's truck. And I finally said, sir, we're not going to take your son. He doesn't need to go here. You're taking a machine gun to a rabbit hunt. So there's a balance in the triage, because that's the point these people are at, is that you don't take a machine gun to a rabbit hunt or a slingshot to a grizzly bear hunt. You got to balance out the triage with, the needs. So finding the facts, everything from getting someone to look at your computer and the cell phone. Privacy is out the window in parenting today. All that stuff about privacy is ridiculous with all the things that the internet offers. Drug screens, and it's not just your Walmart drug screen. It's like some of them are expensive, but you find out the facts of it. And the best you can find that body of information that is the facts, then you know what you're up against. And that's when it's time to triage. And triage is just like at a train wreck. If they're in that kind of jeopardy, and I always tell parents this, if you have any reasonable expectation that your son or daughter can turn the direction away from what we call the wasteland towards the promised land without coming to a place like Capstone, then you don't need to come here. But if you don't have any reasonable expectation that it can change, you need to hurry, because you're playing Russian roulette every day. So that triage and finding the facts would be the first thing.
Okay, so a reasonable expectation. How do you know what reasonable is?
Every parent is going to have to follow their gut on that.
Okay.
And I think asking questions, calling people, talking, like for, one thing, there's a lot of books to read, there's a lot of different things like that, but people call us and our admissions team, which are all therapists, they know what this thing is about, is that helps them to figure out what's going on. But then talk to the people that, like we have on our reference list. And I'm not trying to do a commercial for Capstone, but talk to people that have been in it and see what they say. That's the most solid litmus test, because anybody that works at a facility can lie and embellish and, whatever, but, people that have been through it, because there are markers that let you know something is off, and this is the main one. I have worked with more than 3,000 families in this situation.
Okay.
I don't have one that by the time they came to Capstone, came to me for outpatient therapy, or sent their child to another program, that what they knew at that point in time was more than 1/4 of what they knew a few weeks later.
Wow.
So the problem is always bigger than you think it is. That's pretty significant thing there. I don't have one exception to that.
So would it be fair to say to somebody who's listening right now and they're thinking, okay, I know my kid's doing this, this, and this. Now multiply that times 4, and that's your real problem.
Yeah, 3 or 4. But
it's
again,
pretty sobering.
can I say this, and this is going to sound crazy? That is your problem, but it is probably also the child's solution. Because when a kid, not even just a kid, when a teen, young adult, and an old adult like me is struggling with drugs, alcohol, pornography, food, which is probably the one most missed in America, any of these things, you know something underneath is going on with that person. Something's hurting and something's missing. There's a void and there's a pain. And so the point is, if you don't find that, you're not going to ever solve it. And honestly, once it becomes this level of a problem, it's like it is a solution to the problem for the person involved in it, but that solution will eventually kill them.
You're saying that the solution that they're pursuing to their real problems is the drug or the porn or the food or the whatever. And so they're going to keep pursuing that unless the pain is revealed and dealt with.
They have to.
Yeah.
I mean, think of it this way. I mean, if you can picture a volcano in your mind and it blows out the top with pornography, which is usually first, the most common one, and you get a giant rock and you cap that volcanic tube, no more eruption, no more porn. Most people, and honestly the biomedical model is saying, hey, this is successful. We've got abstinence. And then the magma pool keeps boiling and it blows out on the side of the mountain for drugs and alcohol. You cap it, the magma pool grows. It blows out on another side, which is, video game binging and those kind of things. And if you can imagine a mountain that's got like 4 or 5 rocks capped where the old volcanoes were erupting, and you look at that and you're like, okay, what's the real assessment of that? There's no relief valve.
Yeah.
That looks like success from a biomedical model, but honestly, that person's closer to suicide than they've ever been.
Right.
There's no relief. So it's almost like that Indiana Jones movie, the first one, when he's trying to steal that thing off that rock and it's booby-trapped and he's trying to slide the sandbag on it. Didn't work out too good for him in that movie, but
That's right.
it's a simultaneous stopping the solution that's killing them while you're healing the reason they need it.
Okay, I want to chase that pain here in just a minute, but before we do, you brought up pornography. What do parents need to know? I mean, you were the one who taught me years ago that average young man in America today is exposed to pornography at age 9. I think it was then. I don't know. It may have moved down a year or two since. Just what precaution would you say to parents about porn and how easily it becomes the drug of choice?
Well, there are less parents like this today, but there's still some that when you say pornography, their transderivational search pulls out Playboy centerfolds. It's by far not that anymore. It's become so much more advanced with internet and moving pornography. But then the genres of pornography are unbelievable now. And so I would say this to you. If God came down and said, Adrian, your sons are going to struggle with one of two things, and I'm going to let you pick which one they struggle with, injecting heroin or pornography, which would you choose? Heroin every day of the week, baby.
Really?
Because the pornography is more evil, it is more difficult, and it is associated with being married someday to the love of their life and having sex, because it is a sexual thing, even though it's very distorted. And so it's a lot more repercussions to it than in dealing with heroin. And so when you look at that, it's like 10 years ago, Dr. Patrick Carnes, I was in the CSAT training, Certified Sexual Addiction Training, and he said, a book is coming out that's going to change the face of sexuality in America. And he started to describe it. It was called 50 Shades of Grey. And he talked about what was in it and all this, bondage, dominant, sadomasochistic, where you tie people up and you inflict pain on them to have sex with them. And
they eventually love it or like it. That's the message.
Well, the message is they've been wanting it anyway.
Yeah.
And so I, being the football coach without a job country boy, looked at Alex Fatula, our clinical director, and I said, dude, nobody's going to get into that stuff. That's ridiculous. He's off on that.
Wow.
Because I thought, if any of my friends and I that grew up together, played college football together, saw someone doing that to a woman, we'd go put a hammer on a man. That's so disrespectful. But today, Gail Dine's research in her book Pornland, she interviewed people from the 15 companies on the planet that produce almost all the world's pornography professionally, and she interviewed porn queens and security guards and executives, etc. One of the things she found is the girls that go, and they are girls, it's not an 18 and up deal, that go to the porn industry today, they don't have to be taught how to act in the rough stuff.
Wow.
They already know. Now, I want you to think the sadness of this. They already know because they're the first generation of girls that have grown up with the first generation of boys who have grown up with BDSM porn being the main genre of porn. I mean, it's like, that's how they think they should treat women. So Gail did a talk at an international symposium, and she said, I'm going to show you guys what an 11-year-old boy found on Google when he typed in porn. And so she popped up the first picture, and it had the little black bar around the breast and the genitalia. And I'll have to admit, I cried. I ended up doing EMDR on it because it bothered me so bad. It was a girl that could not have been more than 15, naked, laying on her stomach, and had the parts covered that should be. And she had mascara running down her face where she had been sobbing. And under it, it was the caption that the boy who had just forced himself on her for oral sex and made her vomit. And it was talking about how great this was. And I'm like, I was so enraged internally, and it bothered me so bad I shed tears. But for that boy that's watching that and
this
reading
is his
that,
introduction to what sexuality is.
well, it is the setting of their arousal template.
Yeah.
And it's like, could you get aroused by something like that? No, and neither could I. But if that's where you were taught to be aroused by watching pornography, I want you to measure it this way. In the end of this thing, the biggest damage from pornography is going to be divorce.
Right.
Because nobody's marriage is going to make it.
That's right.
Through that kind of thing.
It's going to lead to generational dissolution of relationships. Yeah. Already is. Yeah. And when that young man grows, yes, absolutely. And I'm just going to tell you something we've told our audience in the past as it relates to this conversation. Just a few years ago, the number 1 and number 3 searched porn genres in the world were step-family related.
Yep.
Stepfather, stepdaughter, step-sibling,
yep.
Sex. Again, if that's setting the arousal template for anybody, if that's defining what, it just makes you sick. Yep. So back to your statement, we need to guard our kids' eyes as much as we possibly can. Teach, talk, direct, and help prevent pornography from being in their life.
Yeah, so you've got two parts of that, and I guess I do this automatically, but there's an offensive part and a defensive part. The defensive part is protection from porn. And it's like everything, the smartphone is the biggest culprit in that. There's a lot of phones you can get that they look like a smartphone, so your kids don't have to deal with being made fun of if that's a deal to you. But it's like they don't get on the internet. That's one. Keep them away from it. But then two, and this is where I think families and especially church fail miserably, and that's teach kids how to have the greatest sex in the world. That's biblical. God created it. He wants us to have the greatest sex in the world. 90% of a sexual encounter between a husband and wife is, romancing each other's heart between that moment and the last time they had sex, and 10% is the romance in their body. And it's like it's an intimacy-based sex, God bless, versus an intensity-based sex. And so with the stepsister, stepmom, and all that stuff you're talking about, that's intensity-based by adding more taboo to the formula. They did a study of some guys that were kind of wired up to test their arousal, and it was watching probably about a 25-year-old woman, nice looking, but dressed in jeans and a polo, not immodest at all. I don't know how you could look at her and lust unless you just really were having problems. And they watched her walk down a sidewalk. She was no arousal. Then they went up in an alley and put this little ladder bridge across and had the same woman, same outfit, same guys, had her walk across it. And their arousal went up. And the reason it did was fear. When you add fear, when you add taboo, it's like affairs. I've worked hundreds of affairs with couples. And often I know who the other woman is, or the other man. And I'm always thinking in my mind, and I've asked it a couple times, what are you thinking, dude?
Why would you risk your marriage?
Look at your wife, and why are you doing that? And it's like the intensity is not because of the person, because of their looks, because of whatever. It's the taboo of it is what makes the dopamine system release, and everything then is exaggerated. And so pornography does that to the tune that Dr. Carnes says, moving porn for a male is an 1,100% dopamine potentiation.
Wow.
That's so much more than cocaine or anything else. So it's that kind of powerful neurobiology.
Well, if you're watching or listening, I hope you're paying attention. I'm also going to put in a program note. We did a conversation with Brian Goins about his series called Brain, Heart, World that is on Fight the New Drug. That's a series you actually share with your young children and watch together to help educate them about pornography, its effects, and how to avoid it. And so let me just put in a plug for that. You can scroll through our podcast episodes and find that and listen to that as well. Okay, so let's go back and chase the trauma piece. I know you've worked so much with this, chasing the pain behind what's going on. So back to the volcano, let me just remind our listeners, if there's an eruption into, if you will, into the escape of porn, drink, drug, whatever it might be, that's indicative of some sort of magma that has been heated up down below. Am I getting that right?
Let me make sure I'm communicating to you the distinction. You take two boys and they drink a couple beers and feel some euphoria. And one of them's like, okay, I wondered what that was going to feel like. I might do it again, I might not. The other one is, oh, I got to have some more of that. And so think of it like this. The degree to which there is an internal anxiety from pain, fear, emptiness is a power factor in the enticement level of those two beers. So let's say that there's someone that's on a 0 to 10 scale at a 6 in pain and emptiness and fear of whatever. And the person they're with is at a 2. They both drink those two beers. Well, the one that's at a 6, the enticement level to go back and do it again is 3 times that of the 2. Make sense?
Yep.
So, and I've never drank a beer in my life, so it's not one of those things I've ever wanted to do. My mom said, if you want to play pro football, don't ever drink a beer, and I think she brainwashed me. It's like, would the normal person want to feel the euphoria of alcohol? Okay, yeah. Ask that about pornography. Would the normal guy want to look at beautiful naked women? Of course they would. So to look at it, and it's like, and if you look at it, there's going to be a masturbatory fantasy that goes with it. That's a pretty natural, normal thing for anybody to want to do. But to get into it to the point that it is an avoidance pattern from your pain, that's when you see it as a problem. You won't ever see it as a problem when it's that experimentation and then you leave it alone because it'll go away on its own. But when you're noticing it, it does mean that there is a magma pool there of some hurt.
So if somebody is sitting here going, I think there's some hurt in my kid or somebody else's kid that I care about, how do you chase that pain? How do you do that in an appropriate way? And what kinds of things might they discover there?
Well, the first thing I would say is what you don't do. And the classic model on this is detach and practice tough love.
Okay.
And honestly,
you don't do that. In other words, that's detach, meaning emotionally step away from your kid. Just say knock it off, and you're punished till the whatever.
It's like we had somebody that went to an intensive after Capstone. Parents worked really hard. Kid did too. A late blooming 15-year-old, and the place they went to said, to make him responsible for his recovery, like he was a 40-year-old alcoholic, and parents go to Al-Anon and practice tough love. Which thank God they did not do because they had learned better, by that point in time. But it's like detach and practice tough love is honestly one of the dumbest things that's ever come down the pipe. Attach deeper and practice healthy boundaries. That's how you can help your child.
What does that look like?
And it is about, one, you just go to the basic message of the gospel. the basic message is a rupture and repair model. And after the repair, you're better off than before the rupture. I mean, that's the whole Ephesians 2:10.
Yeah.
We're the masterpiece once we've been made again. And so in a family, not avoiding but engaging in all kinds of different things shows kids how that there is always, through the restoration process of rupture and repair, something better on the other side of it. So it's connection first, it's relationship first, which you might not have the opportunity to do if you're in a crisis. You may have to do just an absolute boundary. We're drawing the line. This is what's fixing to happen, and then work on the relationship, because you can't let them die if they're so far down into drugs or whatever. So the idea is, I think a broad answer to that would encompass everything is, first, my son or my daughter is doing X, Y, and Z. What makes that make sense? That's the question. Not what makes it right, good, bad, ugly, smart, stupid, or anything else. It's what makes it make sense. And then believe there is an answer. But the answer is not like one domino that fell over and knocked over the rest in the gym. It is like a jigsaw puzzle picture with multiple pieces. You know, we've had plenty of boys that came through Capstone. I've had plenty of women that I've worked with in private practice, and they have been forcibly raped. They've gone through parents' death, parents' divorce and parents' death. Those are the top two traumas for a child. And it's like, and those are giant reasons. Never have I seen it be the only reason. It is always in a choreography of a dozen or so more. So I think the main point is, most parents look at it and think it does not make sense, because we have raised our children not to be like that. They know better. They're loved at home and blah, blah, blah. But this is what I'm promising you. There's always a set of answers to that question. And if you don't find them, you don't change things, because that's what has to be addressed in that bang pool. Does that make sense?
It does. And part of what I'm hearing here is sometimes we as parents have to go, yeah, there's something I'm not seeing, and I have to be open to finding that. If I just think, there's no reason for them to be doing this, they just shouldn't be, then I'm not listening. I don't have the right antenna up to even move towards my child and try to hear the pain that's going on with them.
Yeah, and here's the deal. No matter how astute and committed parents are, Satan wants inside our families. And he's brilliant at sneaking in with the stealthness of a virus. And I've worked with so many families. I have my own family where my own children have been hurt by different things. And it's like, I don't know of anybody that grows up and becomes an adult that did not go through things that could take them out. And so if it weren't for the parents doing the best job that could be done, they would all be smashed to the point that they can't recover. But it's like, none of us are immune to that. Nobody can create that kind of fort to keep the bad guys out, if that makes sense to you. So number one, if you're seeing it, something's off. Now the deal is, find out what it is underneath.
That's so good, because we all need to hear that as parents. We all want to be that formidable wall that keeps our kids from having to experience anything or go through any of this or make these kinds of choices. And I appreciate you saying that, because maybe another way to say it is, we're not all to blame, and don't get into that blame game. The point is, listen, find out, explore, listen, help put some of the pieces together, if only for you, but maybe even with and for your child. At least that's a step towards understanding what that big magma buildup is all about.
Yeah, it's almost like I guess because I've worked with so many kids that have been sexually abused. I've been sexually abused myself when I was 4, not near as severely as many guys at Capstone, but know what a big T trauma it is. It's like the fear of that is probably the greatest fear that parents have. And the thing is, if somebody wants to infiltrate your family, they're probably going to eventually, get there if they want it bad enough. And so the point is, a parent's finest hours are not just in the protection and in that kind of scenario. Honestly, a parent's finest hours comes in their darkest hours. And I've seen it play out many, many, many times. You know, I didn't plan when I said I do with Joanna that we would face the things that we face with her health, with children, with struggles. And I had this brilliant plan. You know, football coach lays out the plan. You know, this is how I'm going to be this dad, follow what my dad did, and blah, blah, blah. But when it hits you, it's like that's when you become or show your finest hours as a parent. And on the other side of it, something's better than there was before it started. So the hope of this deal, and honestly, it's just the pattern of the gospel. You know, rupture, repair, and masterpiece. And for that reason, and I would say it this way, as a dad, when people come in and I'm working with them at Capstone, my stomach falls out my shoes, I shed tears, it hurts, you know, and it's like, but as a therapist, I'm not unconfident at all because of this. The gospel says rupture, repair, masterpiece, and I get to watch that happen, you know, a lot.
If somebody's watching or listening right now and their child is out of the house, maybe they're a young adult, one of the things we see in blended families is kids leave home at a younger age. You know, they've been through some stress. They've been through some hard transition, unwanted transition. And in particular, if there's, you know, biological parents who are still, even after the divorce, for example, still a lot of conflict between households. And, you know, kids kind of find a way out of that stress, often by leaving home, but they're still carrying their pain with them. So now they're a young adult. They're living life. At least they're trying to do life. But you're concerned or you're seeing some things going on in there. That's a tough situation for a parent. They're not in your home anymore.
Right.
What thoughts would you offer?
Well, I mean, think about you and your job here at FamilyLife. You have some people that probably knock on your door and come in and say, hey, I got this thing going. Can you help me with it? And so you give them everything you can. You got other people that might send you an email from somewhere in Alaska that signs it John Doe. And it's like, and you only get one little email, so you give them what you can. So it's almost like, what power do you have with them? Maybe it's not as much as if there's 6 in your home, but you've got some influence. And the thing that I always hold on to that is, by the time every one of these children die, hopefully many years from now, their parents will have been the biggest influence in their life. So you do have some power with that. Use it to the best of your ability. One of the things that changes once they leave home, whether it's an intact family or a blended family, is, you know, like I didn't get Daddy Day anymore on Saturday like I did when they were at home.
Right.
You know, I said, I don't care what anybody else wants. You got me on Daddy Day on Saturday. And so you have to plan the weekend getaway months in advance to have those time together. The little, you know, every few days phone calls or letters or emails or whatever, trying to maintain contact. But then if it reaches the critical point that you just have to go and have that sit down, that we got a fork in the road here, and you hadn't traveled down either one of them, but let me tell you what I'm going to do if you go down this one or that one. And then you've got your, that to me is the healthy boundary part of what I was talking about a while ago. Don't think that you are neutral as far as your effect or impact in a situation like that. Kids want love and connection with their parents, even if they're saying F you in the moment. Does that make sense to you?
It does. Use your influence that you have as best you can.
Yeah.
Got another question for you. We had a woman write to us and say, okay, my husband's son has got a problem. He's drinking a lot. He goes to his mom's house, and she sort of lets that happen. So there's a lot of free reign over there. We're trying to do what we can over here. But in the meantime, this stepmother is saying, I've got younger kids, so step siblings to the boy who's drinking, and I don't want my kids being exposed to this. And so it's that dynamic. If I could set it up for you, and just love your comments, it's that dynamic you talked about earlier where the biological dad and the stepmom are seeing things a little differently, but the big ouch factor for the stepmom is her younger kids and wanting to try to protect them. So she feels like she almost has to be sort of, you know, against her stepson in some ways, and that pits she and her husband against one another. I mean, that's a tough place to be in. Just what are your thoughts about younger siblings? How influenced are they going to be? And you know, any thoughts you might have on that specific situation?
I mean, obviously it's a double bind on both sides there, so a double bind. there was a couple of Star Trek movies that came out many years ago, probably before you were born, since I'm so much older than you. But in the first one, Spock is going to sacrifice his life to save the Enterprise. And Kirk, of course, is trying to stop him, and Spock says, "Captain, did it ever occur to you that the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the one sometimes?" And so Spock dies. Second movie, Kirk goes to the Genesis planet, and he's going to be able to bring Spock back, and he's risking the whole Enterprise. Spock says, "Captain, you can't do this." And he says, "Mr. Spock, did it ever occur to you that sometimes the needs of the one outweighs the needs of the many?" So just the flip-flop of the first movie.
Right.
I always go look at both sides of the coin on that, and you're looking at what can you do that's the best for both sides of it. If you have a tie, which you're going to have that sometimes, the younger kids that are the most vulnerable is what I would say that you would need to protect first. But I don't think you have to do it either or very many times. I mean, I could imagine a scenario like it, but most of the time, what you're doing to help one is what you're doing to help the other. The disagreement between parents and step-parents, et cetera, I always, there's somebody in the situation that has the decision, that they have the call. Okay, that's the main person. In my opinion, if they're on, it should be the birth parent.
Yes.
And the step parent be a backer of what the birth parent wants to do. I know that's ideal, but in that situation, finding the facts, like we talked about a while ago, is almost always the best way to convert the non-believing parent, if you will.
Gotcha.
Because honestly, and as weird as this may sound for us onlookers that get to watch it on the screen, sometimes they just don't see it. And so finding out facts, would be a way to help them to see we really need to do something.
Yeah, Adrian, I think your point's well taken, and I'm just going to add to that for our audience. Often that is the biological parent who's the slow one to see the significance of what their child is doing. And sometimes that's related to the journey that the family has been on.
Sure.
You've seen your kids go through a lot. You've seen them, suffer. Mom's not a great parent, so when my son goes to mom's house, she lets him get away with everything. And so what I got to do is not press too hard because, then he falls apart. And so there's something protective going on inside that biological dad in this little scenario, and yet that is paralyzing him from being able to really be what his son needs him to be. And so I can see chasing those facts and looking at them honestly and recognizing the significance of what's happening with your child's behavior. It would be really, really important. What I would want to say to the step-parent in that scenario is, you may be sick and tired of being patient, but your husband needs you in that case to be gentle with him as he's trying to get there, rather than yelling and screaming at him. Yes, he needs you to help him sort of wake up to it, but at the same time, there's got to be a gentleness in how you approach him, because the goal here is for you as step-parent and bio-parent to come together around how you're going to help all the children. As long as you're divided as a couple, I think this goes back to what you were saying earlier, as long as there's a division there, it's going to be really hard to try to make decisions that everybody feels good about.
Yeah, and the thing is, the divided front, no matter what the constellation is of the executive subsystem, is the biggest low point in the wall. To use the Nehemiah metaphor, it's like divided front means you're going to probably hit tragedy someday. United front, on the other hand, is the greatest resource. We're really good at what we do at Capstone. I'm really good at doing this therapy. I'm not even close to as important as a united front with mom and dad, or stepdad and mom, and those kind of scenarios. So it's like, if I'm the non-believing parent or step-parent, then a guy like Adrian is going to say, okay, then let's do these things to find out what's really going on.
Okay.
And then it'll prove that you're right or that you're not. Because if you weren't right, would you not want to do something different? It's kind of, creating that yes set kind of deal. Of course I'd want to do something different if I thought it was that kind of a big deal.
Right.
Okay, then let's find out. Because I go back to find the facts. Because then you take all of I'm trying to protect, I'm trying to save myself because that'll be another failure. I've already gone through a divorce, those kind of things that are just normal things. And the bottom line of it is, the truth will set you free, and the absence of it will put you in captivity.
Let's turn the corner for a minute.
Yeah.
Let's talk to church leaders, lay couples who are leading blended family small groups. And there's a couple in their group or more who have kids who are drinking, drugging, doing something. Talk to senior pastors for a minute. What can the church do better as it relates to our young people and their escapism behavior?
You know, this would retrospectively go back to the family scenario you just talked about. If whatever you're doing is avoiding whatever the challenge is, it's the wrong thing. It might fit better in a church directory picture to avoid. It might fit better to say the word fine in the foyer, but there's going to be catastrophic losses from it. So engagement in what's in front of you. So you ask the question, it's that quote of where the battle rages. You know, that's where you know where the soldier's true. Are we fighting where the battle rages in our ministry? You know, or are we just trying to have more numbers and more things we do together, et cetera? Knowing the sheep, knowing what's going on is risky. It's an investment in intimacy. It's something that there's fear of rejection and possibility of rejection. But I would say to them, where is Satan taking out over 50% of the children raised in Christian homes and Christian churches? You know, it's not because they've not heard enough expository preaching from the pulpit. It's because they're not connected, they're not protected, they're not prepared, and they don't understand the restoration of rupture and repair. And it's like those get down to the bone marrow nitty gritty stuff of we all have struggles. Now let's go see if we can face them. Instead, it's the image. And I would say the idea of, you know, mask, everybody, you know, talks about mask, but it's like, I think our concept of leadership is I have to put on a leadership mask. But if you paint all the things you're showing on the outside of that mask to the masses, but on the other side paint what's really there, they're going to be two very different pictures. And in reality, the one we're called to be is the one on the inside. And so I'd almost say it is about getting naked with your heart and finding out what we're up against and addressing where the battle rages.
You keep using the word connected, and I just think, boy, I'd love to share one or two examples. What is a connected parent doing? What does that look like to be connected emotionally with your kids? And I know it depends on their age, so that's a really hard question. But you know, part of it is as simple as putting your phone down.
Oh, yeah.
Actually engaging your children in their day and conversation. You know what I did before you and I sat down today? I had lunch with my 25-year-old son. I do that every week, and I'm buying lunch because I want him to come, because I want to be able to stay in his life. I want to keep my influence there. I want to just be around for the day when he needs me. Otherwise, we're just having fun and blowing smoke and enjoying a good meal and talking about life, just doing a little mentoring is life. I think, is that what connected sort of looks like?
Yes, there's different parts of it. It's like being together in a quantity time situation, which means don't do the quality time deal. That's a myth because nobody's smart enough to orchestrate that.
Yeah,
you have to be with each other large amounts of time in order to have some of those quality time memories. So that amount of time changes, and like with your 25-year-old, it's not as much quantity time in that lunch that you would have had at 12. But it's like you got to have the time. You got to be with them. But then when you are with them, you put the phone down. It's interaction without distraction.
Okay.
And it's like your emotions are there and all those kind of things. But let's say that you had someone that was so disciplined and regimented that they could just do those kind of things every day. But their own personal, what's called attunement, meaning inner harmony, being in tune inside, because of they grew up in a family where parents had trauma and they had a frozen emotional system, so they have one, or they have their own unhealed trauma and they're frozen. It's kind of like a situation with my youngest daughter. When our oldest daughter was in the hospital at 16, our 14-year-old was carrying the weight of the world with her sister's life weighing in the balance at the Cleveland Clinic, and she was getting ready to play the district junior high basketball game. So I'm PhD in marriage and family therapy. I'm this dad who's my kids are number one to this day. Always have been. Always had that time. So I'm smart. I know what to do, right? So I'm going to go to her and do those things you and I just talked about. I said, Lauren, I want you to know that I know you're carrying the weight of the world with your sister being up there, and you've got the pressure of being the lead scorer, and you got to do this. And I just wanted you to know that I don't want you to carry that alone. I want you to be able to come and talk to me because I'm your dad, I'm in your corner, and I'm approachable, and you can tell me anything. And I just kept going. And I'm like, I was as approachable as a porcupine being swallowed backwards. And so if you're in the crisis and you're doing the right things, you're not approachable. You're not in attunement because you're in survival mechanism.
Yeah.
If you haven't healed from trauma, you're in survival mechanism as well. That's what the evidence of in the autonomic nervous system of being stuck in the own position, either fight or flight or freeze, fawn, and flop. And so parents have to do their own work in sort of like what makes me make sense. What things in my life hurt me? What things in my life helped me? What were the messages that both those things gave? How did it make me feel, and how did I respond to it? Basically, it's how do I deal with the toxic shame of my childhood?
So that awareness of yourself is what then frees you to be able to connect with your kid in a very genuine and authentic way.
Yeah, the awareness frees you to start doing the work so you can be connectable. So think about attunement and secure attachment and then growing intimacy. It's like that's kind of the ladder, in it. You can love 100%, be willing to die a slow, torturous death 100%, and still not have core-to-core connection. And that comes from, one, I have to be attuned, and we have to be attached and get that emotional trust bond between us. That makes sense?
That makes a lot of sense. This is really good. Adrian, thank you for being with me today.
I enjoyed it.
It's been a great conversation. It's been long overdue. You're my neighbor, just an hour up the road. I'm so glad we were finally able to make this happen. Thanks for being with us. Well, if you want to learn more about Adrian, check the show notes. It's going to be able to cue you in and get you connected to Capstone. Family Life Blended is a donor-supported ministry, and this month I want to let you know that for a gift of any amount, we'll send you our premium resource. It's a book called In Their Shoes. It was written by Lauren Reitzema. She's been a guest on this podcast. She's spoken for Family Life Blended many times. I believe so much in this book that I helped Lauren get it published. It is so well done. It's going to help you understand your child and your stepchild and the journey that they have been on through a divorced family situation and now into a blended family. What does that do to their identity and their sense of safety in life? So that's our premium exclusive offer for Family Life Blended listeners and viewers. So make sure you use the link in our show notes when you make that donation. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast or subscribed on YouTube so you can watch it, please do that. We don't want you to miss any episodes. And please plan to join us in Dallas for the next summit on Step Family Ministry. Again, October 10 and 11, 2024. Well, next time, Gayla Grace is going to be back in the studio with me, and we're going to be tackling one of the most insidious dynamics, I think, in blended family marriages, the ghost of marriage past. That's next time on Family Life Blended. I'm Ron Deal. Thanks for listening or watching, and thank you to our production team and our donors who make this podcast possible. Family Life Blended is part of the Family Life Podcast Network, helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.